Pay my fee or get out of my house, my brother yelled. So I handed him an envelope. The room went silent. All right, Reddit. My older brother Eric yelled this at me during Sunday dinner while our parents nodded along. But there was one thing none of them knew. Let me set the scene. I'm Danny, 30 male, union electrician pulling 95K. Eric's 33, my older brother, works some nonsense senior project coordinator job, making 52K to shuffle emails around for a mid-tier consulting firm. Lives at home, contributes zero to household expenses, but somehow appointed himself Lord of the Manor. Mom and Dad treat him like he's running a Fortune 500 company. Meanwhile, I'm the disappointment, because I didn't go to college and work with my hands instead of pushing pixels. I moved back in 2 years ago after my engagement imploded. Caught my fiancée texting her ex about how she settled for me because I was stable but boring. Left her the ring and the apartment lease. Figured I'd crash at the family house, save money, help with bills since Dad's pension wasn't covering much. Biggest mistake of my life. From day one, Eric positioned himself as the responsible son, graciously allowing his screw-up little brother to stay in his space. Everything became a power play. Where I parked my work truck, what shelves I could use in the garage, how long my showers could be. But Eric wasn't just territorial. The guy had turned manipulation into an art form, and our parents ate it up like candy. He'd make helpful comments about my transition period and how I needed structure and boundaries to get back on my feet. Mom would nod and say things like, Eric's being so mature about this situation. Meanwhile, he was making my life hell. My work clothes would disappear from the dryer, then turn up wrinkled in random closets. My alarm clock would mysteriously reset itself, making me late for jobs. Tools would go missing from my kit. Then Eric would find them in weird places with this concerned look like I was losing my mind. The real genius was how he'd frame everything as concern for my well-being. Danny seems really scattered lately. When I'd confront him directly, he would get this hurt expression and say something like, I'm just trying to help. No need to get defensive. Then he'd go straight to Mom and Dad with his wounded brother act. I don't know what's wrong with Danny. He's so angry all the time. I'm worried about him. Make me question my own sanity while painting himself as the caring older brother. But his masterstroke was the garage situation. I keep about $40,000 worth of specialized electrical equipment in there. Meters that detect live voltage, safety gear rated for industrial work, emergency tools that weigh 150 pounds and cost more than Eric's car. Eric decided he needed that space for a home gym he used exactly once. He knew my equipment was critical for emergency callouts. Knew I couldn't store this stuff anywhere else without adding 40 minutes to my response time. He was deliberately trying to mess with my ability to make a living. The family meeting was pure theater. Eric had done his homework, coached Mom and Dad on all the right talking points about fair contribution and shared responsibility. Danny's been living here rent-free for 2 years, Eric said, looking around the table. Meanwhile, I'm covering utilities, groceries, maintenance. It's not sustainable. Mom jumped in right on cue. Eric's been so generous with his time and money. It's only fair that everyone contributes. Dad nodded along. Son, you're 30 years old. Time to start acting like an adult. The garage fee was Eric's brilliant solution. $800 a month or find somewhere else to store my hobby equipment. $800. I looked around at my family nodding along with this extortion scheme and felt something cold settle in my chest. This was the moment I realized Eric had just declared war on the wrong person. I'll think about it, I said. He grinned like he'd already won. Great. First payment's due next Friday. I'll send you my Venmo. That smile was going to cost him everything. What my family didn't know was that I'd already saved them once before. 8 years ago. 2016. Dad's import business collapsed when his main supplier got busted for selling counterfeit electronics. 30 years of building relationships, gone overnight. The lawsuits came fast and brutal. Legal fees ate through their savings like acid through steel. I was 22, fresh out of my apprenticeship, making decent money, but nothing spectacular. Had managed to save about $85,000 by living in a studio apartment that smelled like feet and driving a truck held together with duct tape and prayer. Found Dad one night at the kitchen table, surrounded by foreclosure notices. My old man crying over bank documents. They needed $95,000 to bring the mortgage current. Had 3 weeks before the auction. I could have used that money for my own place, my own future. Instead, I watched my father fall apart and made a choice that would define the next decade. My buddy Hunter works commercial real estate law. Smart guy, knows all the angles. I explained the situation and he got this look, half impressed, half concerned. Danny, you sure about this? That's your entire future you're talking about. It's Family Hunter. So we set it up legal. Created an LLC called Redwood Holdings. I bought the house at auction for $92,000, about $15,000 under market because the neighborhood was still recovering from 2008. Then I leased it back to my parents for exactly what they could afford, $1,200 a month. Told them some investor bought it and was giving them a sweetheart deal because he liked working families. Mom cried with relief. Dad shook my hand and said I was a good son for helping them find such a generous landlord. They never questioned it. Too grateful, too embarrassed, too desperate to dig deeper. For 8 years, I've been their secret landlord. Every property tax payment, every major repair, every insurance claim, my responsibility, my money. The $1,200 they pay covers maybe half of my actual costs. Eric moved back in right after college and immediately started acting like he owned the place. Mom would brag to neighbors about how responsible Eric is, really taking charge of the household, when his actual contribution was maybe $300 toward groceries. Meanwhile, I'm dropping $18,000 a year just on carrying costs, plus another $20,000 on maintenance and upgrades. New roof in 2019, foundation work in 2021, HVAC replacement last year. But I kept quiet. Family peace seemed worth the investment, until Eric decided to charge me rent to use my own garage. The irony was so perfect it made my teeth hurt. Here's this entitled jerk, living rent-free in a house I saved from foreclosure, demanding I pay him money to store equipment that keeps me employed. Eric thought he was playing chess. He had no idea I'd been playing 4D chess for 8 darn years. Eric's garage ultimatum was just the opening move. When I didn't immediately cave, he brought in reinforcements. Enter my cousin Elias. Elias is Eric's age, works some finance job in the city, drives a leased car he can't afford. More importantly, Elias has always resented that I make more money than him without a college degree. He's been waiting years for a chance to see me knock down a peg. Eric invited Elias over for family game night the weekend after his ultimatum. Coincidence? Yeah, right. Danny, heard you're having some adjustment issues, Elias said over dinner, loud enough for everyone to hear. Totally normal after a breakup. Sometimes guys need to hit rock bottom before they can bounce back. Eric jumped in with his concerned brother routine. I've been trying to help Danny establish some healthy boundaries, but he's resistant to structure. Mom and Dad ate this crap up. 2 successful young men agreeing that their problem child needed tough love. Maybe it's time for some real consequences, Elias continued. Can't enable destructive behavior forever. By the end of the night, Eric had Elias convinced that charging me garage fees was actually an intervention designed to help me grow up. Elias even offered to co-sign Eric's household contribution plan to make it seem more official. But Eric's real ace was Angela. Angela is Mom's sister, recently divorced, living in a condo she can barely afford. She's bitter as heck about her ex-husband and sees men as walking ATMs who need constant management. Eric started inviting Angela over for Sunday dinners, positioning himself as the nephew who actually had his stuff together. Within a month, she was his biggest cheerleader. Danny needs structure, Angela would say, nodding along with Eric's latest complaints. Men don't respect what they get for free. Make him pay his way. She had this way of turning every conversation into a lecture about personal responsibility and the importance of not enabling grown men who refuse to launch. The 3 of them, Eric, Elias, and Angela, formed this toxic alliance, all united in the belief that I was the family problem who needed to be fixed through punishment and public shame. Meanwhile, Eric was getting bolder with his harassment. My work schedule became his personal entertainment. If I got called out for an emergency repair at 3 a.m., Eric would bang on the walls and scream about inconsiderate jerks who don't respect people with real jobs. When I'd confront him, he would immediately switch to victim mode. Danny, why are you yelling at me? I was just asking for basic courtesy. Then he'd go straight to Mom and Dad with his wounded act. Danny's really struggling. He screamed at me for asking him to keep it down during work calls. The garage fee became a daily battle. Every morning, Eric would make some comment about professional responsibility and contributing to household expenses. He started putting sticky notes on my equipment. Storage fee past due. Please respect shared spaces. This isn't a warehouse. But the real mind game was how Eric had turned my own family into weapons against me. Every conversation became about my attitude, my responsibilities, my need to step up and be an adult. Elias would drop by randomly to check on the situation and offer unsolicited advice about budgeting and goal setting. Angela would corner me at family gatherings to lecture about the importance of paying my fair share. Eric had created this perfect echo chamber where everyone agreed that I was the problem. Then breaking point came on a Tuesday in September. I'd been pulling doubles all week, restoring power after a storm knocked out transmission lines across 3 counties. Came home at 2 a.m., exhausted, looking forward to maybe 5 hours of sleep before the next call-out. My equipment wasn't just moved this time. It was sabotaged. Found it scattered across the garage floor like someone had gone through it with a sledgehammer. $40,000 worth of specialized electrical gear, some of it damaged beyond repair. My digital multimeter was smashed to pieces. My safety harness had cuts in the straps. My insulated gloves were shredded. This wasn't frustration or anger. This was Eric trying to get me killed. I stood there staring at the destruction, and something shifted in my brain. This wasn't sibling rivalry anymore. Eric had crossed a line you don't cross back from, and he was about to learn exactly what that meant. But first, I had a phone call to make. The next morning, I called my buddy Hunter to schedule a meeting. Not for legal advice this time, for war planning. "Damn it, Danny," Hunter said, looking at photos of the destroyed equipment. "This isn't vandalism. This is sabotage of safety equipment. That cut harness could have killed you. Eric's not stupid enough to do this randomly. He's trying to force me out by making it impossible for me to work. You could press charges. I'm thinking bigger than criminal charges, Hunter. I want him gone. Permanently." Hunter smiled the kind of smile that means someone's about to get legally screwed. "What do you need?" First, I needed documentation. I spent the next week photographing and cataloging every piece of damaged equipment. The insurance company required detailed records for a claim this size, and I wanted everything bulletproof. Second, I needed witnesses. My supervisor had been asking about the equipment, and word was spreading through the union about what Eric had done. These guys don't mess around when someone tampers with safety gear that keeps workers alive. "Danny, whoever did this isn't just your problem," he told me. "They're a threat to every electrician in the state. You press charges, and the union's got your back." Third, I needed to understand Eric's financial situation. His sudden desperation for money had to have a source. That's where my new ally came in handy. My friend Lisa works in credit analysis for a major bank. A smart woman knows how to read financial records like tea leaves. "Your brother's screwed," she told me after running Eric's credit report. 3 maxed-out credit cards, personal loan from some predatory lender, even a payday advance. Total debt looks like about $180,000. No wonder Eric was trying to squeeze money out of me. But the real gold mine was his spending history. Credit card statements showed a pattern of expensive purchases, followed by cash advances to cover minimum payments. Vegas trips, designer clothes, lease payments on that BMW he couldn't afford. The math didn't work, and reality was catching up fast. "Monthly debt service is probably $3,800, Lisa continued. On his salary, after taxes and basic expenses, he's got maybe $400 left over. He's been robbing Peter to pay Paul for at least 2 years. Perfect. While I was building my case, Eric was escalating his campaign. He started timing his nonsense for maximum impact, right before I left for emergency calls, right when I was trying to sleep after double shifts. The genius part was how he'd always have witnesses. Elias would drop by just as Eric was having another reasonable conversation about household responsibilities. Angela would be there to nod along when Eric expressed concern about my anger issues. When I'd react with any frustration, Eric would immediately pivot to victim mode. "See? This is exactly what I'm talking about. Danny can't handle normal adult conversations without getting aggressive." The family was eating it up. Mom started making comments about maybe I should consider counseling to work through some of these issues. Dad would pull me aside for awkward talks about managing stress in healthy ways. Eric had successfully reframed the entire situation. He was now the concerned brother trying to help his unstable sibling work through personal problems. But he made one crucial mistake. He got cocky. The garage fee deadline came and went. When I didn't pay, Eric announced that he was temporarily relocating my equipment to make room for his home gym. Found my gear piled in the backyard like garbage. $40,000 worth of specialized electrical equipment just sitting in the dirt. He was deliberately trying to destroy my ability to make a living. Time to remind everyone whose name was actually on the deed. Hunter had prepared 3 documents that would end Eric's little empire. Formal eviction notice, cease and desist order for property destruction, and the nuclear option. Official lease agreements for mom and dad at market rate. "This establishes your ownership beyond any doubt," Hunter explained. "If they refuse to sign, they become trespassers just like your brother." I hesitated on that last one. I don't want to screw over my parents. "Danny, your parents have been enabling this behavior for years. Sometimes you have to break a system to fix it." Lisa had been tracking Eric's financial situation and it was getting worse by the week. His BMW got repossessed on a Thursday. The payday loan company was calling the house daily. Credit cards were frozen for non-payment. Eric was cornered, desperate, and running out of options, which made him dangerous. But I was done playing defense. The family was planning another intervention Sunday after church. Eric had been laying the groundwork all week, talking about tough love and natural consequences. Perfect timing. Sunday arrived with Eric in peak performance mode. He'd spent the morning setting up his home gym equipment in the garage. By 1 p.m., the house was full of Eric's allies. Elias had driven down from the city, Angela was holding court in the kitchen, and Mom and Dad were playing their roles as the concerned parents dealing with their problem child. Eric had orchestrated this perfectly. Every conversation steered toward my situation and the need for clear boundaries and expectations. Danny needs to understand that actions have consequences, Angela was telling Mom while I grilled burgers. Coddling him isn't helping anyone. Elias nodded along. In my finance training, we learned that people don't change behavior until they face real costs for their choices. Eric was working the crowd like a politician. The garage fee had become symbolic of everything wrong with my character. I hate being the bad guy, Eric said, loud enough for everyone to hear, but someone has to help Danny learn how the real world works. More nods. That's when I decided it was time to drop the bomb. Speaking of the real world, I said, pulling out the envelope Hunter had prepared, I think we should clear up exactly how the real world works around here. Eric's eyes lit up. What's that supposed to mean? He asked, his voice carrying just the right note of patient concern. I handed him the first document. It means you have 30 days to find somewhere else to live. The backyard went dead silent. Eric looked down at the eviction notice like it was written in hieroglyphics. What is this? Eviction notice. You're being asked to leave the property. What property? Eric's voice cracked. This is Mom and Dad's house. I handed Mom and Dad their copies of the lease agreements. Actually, it's my house. It has been for 8 years. Silence. Dad's face went white. Danny, what are you talking about? Remember 2016, Dad? When the business collapsed and you were facing foreclosure? I bought this house at auction. Been your landlord ever since? Eric was still staring at his eviction notice. This is impossible. You can't just... Eric, I interrupted, pulling out my phone. You caused $40,000 in damage to my electrical safety equipment. Equipment that keeps me alive when I'm working on high-voltage power lines. I showed the pictures to the table. Cut safety harness. Smashed multimeter. Thousands of dollars in gear piled in the dirt like garbage. The mood shifted. Faces that had been nodding along with Eric's responsible brother act were now staring at him with horror. I continued, my voice calm and factual. That safety harness prevents me from falling off transmission towers. The multimeter tells me whether a wire will electrocute me. If I'd used damaged equipment without realizing it, you'd be planning my funeral. Angela was the first to find her voice. Eric, you destroyed Danny's work equipment? Eric's composure was cracking. It was an accident. I was just trying to... You were trying to force me out by making it impossible for me to work safely. When I wouldn't pay your garbage garage fee, you decided to sabotage my livelihood. Elias leaned forward, suddenly very interested. Wait, you own this house? How much have you been paying and carrying costs? I pulled out my phone and showed the bank statements. 8 years of mortgage payments, property taxes, insurance premiums, major repairs. The numbers were brutal. $230,000, I said quietly. While Eric's been living here rent-free and demanding I pay him storage fees, Mom started crying. Dad sat in stunned silence. Angela and Elias looked like they were trying to recalculate their entire understanding of the family dynamics. But Eric wasn't done. Cornered animals are dangerous, and he was about to show exactly how far he'd go when backed into a corner. This is all nonsense, he said, his voice rising. Danny's having some kind of breakdown, making up stories to justify. Eric, I cut him off. The property records are public. The bank statements are real. The destroyed equipment is documented and photographed. What part of this is made up? Eric looked around the table desperately, searching for someone who'd believe his version of reality. But the evidence was overwhelming. That's when he made his final play. Eric's face cycled through shock, denial, rage, and finally landed on cold calculation. The mask was off completely now. You want to play hardball, Danny? Fine. Let's see how this works out for you. He turned to Mom and Dad, switching to his wounded victim voice. This is exactly what I've been trying to tell you. Danny's been lying to you for 8 years, manipulating you, taking advantage of your trust. Mom looked confused. But honey, if he bought the house, he bought it without telling you. That's not family loyalty. That's control. Within minutes, he'd reframed 8 years of financial sacrifice as manipulative control. Made my parents question whether helping them was actually hurting them. Think about it, he continued, warming to his theme. Danny could have told you the truth at any time. Instead, he let you feel grateful to some imaginary landlord while he pulled all the strings. That's sick. Angela jumped in. Eric has a point. Why keep it secret unless you had ulterior motives? Elias nodded along. In finance, we call that controlling through information asymmetry. That's manipulation. I watched my family turn the greatest sacrifice I'd ever made into evidence of my character flaws. Dad was starting to look convinced. Son, why didn't you tell us? Because I wanted to help without making you feel indebted. Because I thought we were family. Eric laughed. Family? You've been playing landlord for 8 years, Danny. Collecting rent, making decisions about our home without consulting us? How is that family? Now, instead of the brother who saved them from foreclosure, I became the manipulator who'd been controlling them through financial leverage. Mom was crying harder now, but I couldn't tell if it was gratitude or betrayal. Dad just sat there looking lost, trying to process 8 years of lies. Eric pressed his advantage. Danny's been playing the long game, waiting for the right moment to cash in his chips. Probably planned to hold this over us forever. Or, I said quietly, I was a 22-year-old kid who watched his father cry over foreclosure papers and made a choice to help. Help? You've been secretly controlling our living situation for 8 years. The worst part was watching my parents' faces. The gratitude was transforming into suspicion. The relief was becoming resentment. Eric was successfully poisoning the greatest gift I'd ever given them. Eric continued. Why Danny moved back in so easily? Why he acts like he owns the place? Because he does. He's been the landlord this whole time, playing house with his tenants. Angela nodded. And now he's using it as a weapon. Pay my rent or get evicted. That's emotional blackmail. It's not rent, I said. It's stopping you from destroying my safety equipment and trying to extort money from me. But I was losing the narrative battle. Eric smiled for the first time since I'd dropped the bomb. So here's what's going to happen, Eric said, standing up like he was still in charge. Danny's going to tear up these eviction papers, we're going to work out a reasonable household contribution plan, and everyone's going to start being honest for once. I looked around the table at my family, the people I'd sacrificed my 20s to help, and saw doubt and resentment where there should have been gratitude. Eric had won the battle, but he had no idea he was about to lose the war. You're absolutely right, brother, I said quietly. It's time everyone started being honest. I pulled out my phone and made a call. Hunter? Yeah, it's time. File the formal eviction notices. All of them. Eric's confident smile faded fast. All of them? Mom, Dad, you've got 60 days to sign formal lease agreements at market rate or find somewhere else to live. Eric, you've got 30 days to be gone completely. The silence that followed was deafening. If I'm going to be the controlling landlord anyway, I continued, might as well make it official. The aftermath of Sunday dinner was exactly as ugly as you'd expect. Eric immediately went into full victim mode, calling every relative within a 3-state radius to report that his psychotic brother was illegally evicting the whole family over a minor disagreement. Mom and Dad were shell-shocked. They'd spent 48 hours processing the revelation that their financial stability had been a lie. Not my lie, but their own lie about being independent adults. Angela and Elias became Eric's PR team, spreading the story that I'd been financially manipulating the family for years and was now weaponizing charity to get revenge. The narrative was simple. The generous older brother finally stood up to controlling younger sibling, who responded by threatening to make the whole family homeless. But here's the thing about playing victim. It only works if people believe you. By Wednesday, Eric's creditors had figured out where he lived. Repo Company came for the furniture he'd been leasing. Credit card companies started calling the house 10 times a day. That payday loan outfit sent someone to the door with a very unfriendly reminder about payment terms. Eric tried to get ahead of the story by positioning his financial problems as temporary setbacks caused by family stress. Danny's threats have been affecting my work performance, he told Mom. I can't focus with this kind of instability hanging over my head. But Lisa had been tracking Eric's credit situation, and the timeline didn't support his narrative. The debt was years old. The missed payments started long before our garage fee dispute. Your brother's been insolvent for at least 18 months, she told me. The BMW repossession, the furniture lease defaults, the payday loans, none of that happened because of family drama. He's been broke for years. Meanwhile, Mom and Dad were coming to terms with 8 years of reality. Dad spent 3 days going through old bank statements, adding up mortgage payments they hadn't made, property taxes they hadn't paid, insurance premiums they hadn't covered. "Geez, Danny," he said finally, "you've been carrying us this whole time." I wanted to help. That's what family does. But Mom was struggling with the deception angle Eric had planted. "Why didn't you tell us? We had a right to know. Because you would have insisted on paying me back, and you didn't have the money. Because I wanted to help without making you feel like charity cases. Because family takes care of each other." The truth was starting to penetrate, but Eric had done damage. That's when he played his final card, and it was nastier than I'd expected. He went to the police. Not about the eviction. That was perfectly legal. Eric reported that I'd been financially exploiting elderly parents and possibly committing fraud by concealing property ownership. The officer showed up Thursday evening with a very serious expression and a lot of questions about my landlord arrangement. "Your brother claims you've been deceiving your parents about property ownership and collecting rent under false pretenses," he said. "That could constitute elder fraud if the allegations are substantiated." I showed him 8 years of bank records, property tax payments, mortgage statements, and insurance policies. Everything legal, everything documented, everything proving I'd been losing money on the arrangement for nearly a decade. "Sir, this looks like you've been subsidizing your parents' housing for 8 years, the officer said after reviewing the paperwork. "Your brother's complaint doesn't seem to have merit." The real kicker came Friday, when Eric announced he'd found a solution to the whole family crisis. "I've been talking to some people," he told Mom and Dad. "There are legal aid societies that help families fight illegal evictions. We don't have to just accept Danny's threats." Eric had connected with some tenants' rights organizations and convinced them that I was a slumlord trying to evict a family for complaining about living conditions. He'd reframed equipment destruction as asking for repairs, and eviction as retaliation for tenant complaints. Made himself the hero, standing up to an abusive landlord who happened to be his brother. The legal aid lawyer called me directly. "Mr. Falcon, we're prepared to file an injunction against your eviction proceedings, pending investigation of the housing conditions and rent collection practices." "Ma'am, these aren't tenants. They're family members who've been living rent-free in my house for years." "Your brother indicates otherwise. He says the family's been paying rent to a property management company and only recently learned you were the owner." Eric had lied to the lawyer, claiming that Redwood Holdings was some property management company that had been collecting rent and hiding my ownership. Made it sound like I'd been running some kind of shell game to exploit my own family. It was brilliant in its audacity. Eric had turned my generosity into evidence of fraud and my attempt to establish boundaries into proof of abuse. But he made one crucial mistake. He got greedy. Instead of just fighting the eviction, Eric demanded that I return all rent payments collected under false pretenses, meaning he wanted me to pay the family $115,200 for 8 years of below-market rent. He wasn't trying to save the family. He was trying to cash out. Time to show him exactly what scorched earth looked like. Eric's legal aid gambit lasted exactly 1 week. The tenants' rights lawyer took one look at 8 years of bank records showing me losing $30,000 annually on below-market rent and realized she'd been fed nonsense. "Mr. Falcon, your brother provided false information about the financial arrangement," she told me over the phone. "We're withdrawing from the case immediately." But the damage was done. Eric had bought himself another week of feeling like he was winning while poisoning family relationships beyond repair. That's when I made the call that ended everything. "Hunter, file formal eviction proceedings against all of them. Market rate lease agreements with standard terms, or they're all out in 60 days. Eric wants to play victim? Let's give him something real to cry about." The new lease terms were brutal, but fair. $2,800 per month for Mom and Dad, which was actually below market for a 4-bedroom house in our neighborhood. Eric could sign his own lease for the garage apartment at $1,200 monthly, or he could find somewhere else to live. No family discounts, no special arrangements, standard landlord-tenant relationships with everyone treated equally. Brother lost his mind. "This is insane," he screamed when the papers were served. $2,800 a month? They're retired. They can't afford that." "Then maybe they should have appreciated what they had, instead of letting you poison them against it." Mom and Dad were in shock. Dad's pension was $2,400 monthly. Mom's Social Security was $1,100. Combined, they had $3,500 coming in, and I was asking for $2,800 in rent. "Danny, please," Mom begged. "We can't afford the market rate. We'll lose everything." Too late. The beautiful irony was perfect. Eric had spent weeks arguing that my below-market rent was actually exploitation and financial abuse. Now they were getting a taste of what actual market rates looked like. Angela tried to play mediator. Danny, surely we can work something out. Family should stick together. Family sticks together. Tenants pay rent or get evicted. Eric made the choice about which relationship we were going to have. But the real satisfaction came when Eric's creditors started circling. With an eviction notice hanging over his head and no steady address, his remaining credit cards got canceled. The payday loan company filed for wage garnishment. His checking account got frozen for outstanding debts. He was financially destroyed, and everyone could see it. That's when the family meeting started. Private conversations where Eric wasn't invited. Desperate strategizing about how to deal with their new reality. Mom and Dad realized they had exactly one choice: sign the lease agreement and figure out how to make it work, or become homeless. Eric had a different choice: find $1,200 monthly for the garage apartment, or find somewhere else to live. But Eric being Eric, he tried one last manipulation. I'll sign the lease, he announced at Sunday dinner. But I want everyone to understand that Danny's destroying this family over money. When we're all struggling to make rent payments, remember who chose greed over family. Eric, I said, you destroyed $40,000 of my safety equipment because I wouldn't pay you $800 to use my own garage. Don't lecture me about choosing money over family. His final card was the martyrdom play. He'd sign the lease, pay the rent, and spend the next year making everyone miserable with constant reminders about how unfair everything was. But he had forgotten one crucial detail. He was broke. The garage apartment lease required first month's rent, last month's rent, and a security deposit. Total upfront cost, $3,600. He didn't have $3,600. Heck, he didn't have $360. I'll need a few weeks to get the money together, he said. Lease applications require payment within 72 hours, or the offer expires. He looked around desperately. Can't someone spot me the money? I'm good for it. The silence was deafening. Nobody was volunteering to bankroll his continued residence in the house where he'd spent 2 years making everyone's life hell. Angela cleared her throat uncomfortably. Eric, honey, I'm barely making my own rent. Elias suddenly found his shoes very interesting. I've got my own financial obligations. Even Mom and Dad stayed quiet. They were going to need every dollar to make their own rent payments. Guess you've got 72 hours to figure it out, I said. Eric didn't figure it out. Eric disappeared on a Tuesday morning. No goodbye, no forwarding address, no explanation. Just gone, leaving behind a room full of furniture he couldn't afford and debts he couldn't pay. Mom found his goodbye note on the kitchen counter. Thanks for nothing. Hope you're all happy now. Even his exit was everyone else's fault. The creditors kept calling for another month before giving up. Repo company came for the furniture. Credit card companies wrote off the debt as uncollectible. He had successfully burned every bridge he'd ever built while accomplishing absolutely nothing except making himself homeless. Mom and Dad signed their lease agreement the day before the deadline. $2,800 monthly, which meant Dad had to find a part-time job to cover the difference. Mom started babysitting neighborhood kids for extra cash. They were learning what the rest of the world already knew. Housing costs money, and nobody owes you below market rent just because you're family. Angela stopped coming to Sunday dinners. Hard to maintain the moral high ground when your position led to an elderly couple struggling to make rent. Elias found other people to share his finance wisdom with. Amazing how quickly he lost interest in our family dynamics when there was no entertainment value left. For 3 months, everything was quiet. Professional landlord-tenant relationships, rent paid on time. I almost started to think we'd found a new equilibrium. Then came the phone call. It's Dad. We need to talk. They showed up at my work site on a Thursday afternoon. Mom had been crying. Dad could barely make eye contact. Son, we need your help, Dad said quietly. Here it was. The moment I'd been waiting for and dreading in equal measure. What kind of help? Mom found her voice. We can't afford the rent anymore. Your father's part-time job isn't enough, and my babysitting money isn't steady. We were wrong, Dad continued. About Eric, about the situation, about everything. You were trying to help us, and we let Eric poison that. She was crying openly now. We're so sorry, Danny. We know we don't deserve it, but we're begging you to go back to the old arrangement. Please. I looked at my parents. 2 people who'd raised me, loved me, supported me through everything. 2 people who'd also spent months questioning my motives and believing the worst about my character because it was easier than confronting their golden child's nonsense. I appreciate the apology, I said finally, but the answer is no. Dad's face crumpled. Danny, please, we'll lose everything. You already lost everything 8 years ago. I gave it back to you and you threw it away because Eric convinced you it wasn't good enough. We made a mistake. You made a choice. You chose to side with the son who was living off your charity instead of the son who was providing that charity. Mom was sobbing now. What do you want us to do? I want you to live with the consequences of your choices. Eric promised he was the responsible son who would take care of you. Where is he now? They had no answer for that. I continued. You want to live in my house, you pay what it's worth. You can't afford it? Find somewhere you can afford. Dad tried one last time. Danny, we're your parents. You are my tenants, I replied. I walked back to my truck, leaving them standing in the parking lot, finally understanding what consequences actually look like. That was 6 months ago. Mom and Dad found a small apartment across town, 2 bedrooms, $1,400 monthly, which is about what they can afford on their fixed income. They're both working part-time jobs to make ends meet. Eric? Nobody knows. Nobody cares. The house is quiet now. I live alone, which suits me fine. Sometimes people ask if I regret how everything turned out. The answer is no. Eric wanted to find out what happened when you bite the hand that feeds you. Mom and Dad wanted to find out what happened when you question the motives of someone sacrificing for your benefit. Now they all know. I hope it was worth it.